The Big East Conference has canceled the remainder of our men's basketball tournament effective immediately.
That was halftime of the St. John's Creighton game at the Madison Square Garden on March 12th. It was the Big East, the second round, and yes, St. John's was ahead at halftime. Well, the season, it ended right there in the middle of the tournament. As we know, March Madness, it never happened in sports, both college and pro. They've been on ice ever since. But college coaches in New York State still keeping busy. More than 40 of them. They've just formed an alliance called Team New York to fight and build awareness about coronavirus. My next guest, he's part of it. Mike Anderson, head coach of the St. John's men's basketball team. He joins us now. And Coach, I want to talk a lot about trying to coach in the age of COVID. Obviously, you know, we just showed the bizarre way your season ended, literally at a halftime. But I would just say, you know, let the fan in me come out for a minute. As somebody who remembered the Big East for when it was the greatest conference and you had the Final Four run in '85, and I know I speak for a lot of folks, there was more enthusiasm this year with the style and everything else with St. John's than I remember in a long time. And people thought, and myself included, if it didn't get ended prematurely as much as it did, you guys might have had a Cinderella run there at the end. It was amazing how much the season changed from the beginning to the end, wasn't it?
Well, it wasn't the same team that started out at the beginning of the season. I think a lot of things came together, and we were playing some of our better basketball at the Garden against Georgetown, and of course, the game against Creighton, where it just stops at halftime. And you can imagine our guys were really, really disappointed because of how well we were playing. And obviously, as a coach, you got to make sure they understand there's something bigger than the game of basketball, and that's the game of life. And so here we are. If anything could stop it, this pandemic really kind of put a pause, not only on the basketball court, but I think the overall nation, the overall country, as a matter of fact.
You know, I just spoke to Scott Boras from the pro perspective, you know, as relates to Major League Baseball, but you've got a different thing to navigate, as does the university. You're talking about amateurs here. Basketball, there's more contact, obviously, than there is in baseball, and there's no 7 or 8 figure contracts that these kids are kind of measuring against. Do you have clarity what happens come the fall at St. John's, and how do you play games? What will they look like if, in fact, the basketball season resumes?
Well, you probably saw a glimpse of that when we played against Creighton. I mean, there were, you know, I think maybe 200 fans for each team in the stadium. But, you know, I'll leave that up to the experts. I think our administration, along with all the government officials, I think they're are trying to sort and figure it out. I mean, it's one of those situations, it's fluid. It just continues to go from month to month. So here we are, not knowing what's going to take place, but being optimistic that at some point in time we will return.
To that end, little things in the big scheme of things, I guess, but recruiting, how do you recruit? Is it all by Zoom? I mean, how does this work?
Well, I think recruiting is going to be by Zoom and about relationships and communication. You got to get creative, and that's what we're doing. Obviously, being in a big recruiting area, you know, when you talk about the tri-states, obviously we've been in contact with some of the younger kids. But you got to stay in contact and continue to try to build those relationships. You just got to get creative. I think with technology, as you say, with Zoom and virtual tours, and so I'm having to tap into a lot of people to find some new ways of doing this recruiting.
To COVID, we spoke to doctors and frontline staff at Elmhurst, which was at one point, you know, ground zero for this COVID attack and the devastation that happened at that Queens hospital. Obviously not just relegated to that borough, but nonetheless, St. John's even lost one of its family, former player lost a life to it. Talk about what it's been like, because you know, this is not some state in the middle of the country that really hasn't been impacted. New York City probably felt this more than any other place in the country, and St. John's obviously in the center of the city.
We're right in the center of it, the hot spot, so to speak, and it's surreal, as a matter of fact. But the thing that I'm really seeing is a lot of unity. This virus, obviously, it brings out wellness and hopefully oneness. And I think we're seeing a lot of people when you talk about the firefighters, you talk about the medical profession, you talk about the doctors, you talk about the citizens of New York. I think, and it's been led by, by our great governor as well as a mayor. So that these guys all united as one and trying to defeat this virus, but never seen anything like it. And boy, I tell you what, I think we're learning as we go in terms of how to deal with it.
Usually you're trying to beat in the brains of your other coaches, especially in the metropolitan market, not just for players, but head-to-head games. But you guys are coming together. Talk about Team New York, what you're doing and what you're hoping to achieve.
Well, I think it was a great idea. I think when you talk about, the coaches, obviously we all have platforms. And I think this is one of those times where we put, the games aside and let's become one team. Let's be on the team to help defeat or find a vaccine to this virus. So again, just continue to reiterate the things that the experts are saying, the doctors are saying. I think that gives us a platform to do that, and I think as a coach, we're obligated to do it.
Well, you're doing your part, and I know I speak for many here where we hope this return to normalcy is sooner than later. That said, it's also nice that basketball in New York City and the college game, for the hope is you keep that upward trajectory, Coach, and we hopefully get to see some games here, maybe even this year. But I appreciate the few minutes, and I wish you the best of luck.
I appreciate you having me on, and it's amazing. This also gives you a time of reflection. We're blessed to live in a great country, a great world, and I think it's up to us to continue to push everything forward. And even as I sat here and I'm getting a chance to do some of these honeydews, I'm getting a chance to learn how to put curtains up. I mean, I'm just doing a lot of different things, and but at the same time, New York, stay strong.
Absolutely. Coach, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, when we come back, we're going to wrap up RFL.